Hey up everybody, welcome back. Well, as you can see, I'm out of mufti and vertical, but I'm still hobbling about a little bit, so I'm not doing a lot. But the headlamp mountings arrived, speedometer cable, tacho cable, you can't see it but further down there there's a bracket for the front brake caliper, and of course I got that slightly wrong. I knew I had a brake caliper, so I just found a bracket, a mounting bracket, and of course when I looked at the caliper it was the old round type. It's sort of round like that, whereas the newer ones are more triangular. So I've got a proper caliper coming, so that'll be the front brake, cables. What we're going to do is finish all this off today and put the clocks on, and the clocks are a story, so we'll get to that. So let me start to zoom you in and I'll show you a few things. Here are the headlamp mounting brackets. Put them on. They're actually a little bit long. I think with the clocks on and everything it'll look good, but they're about ½ an inch further out from the fork than the standard headlamp bracket on these forks, and of course the forks are slightly forward in the yokes than they would be if it was the Yamaha yokes, so we're moved out a little bit from the headstock. I think it'll all look good, but a little bit long. The thing with these is they're a universal fit, so they fit everything from 35mm forks up to about 41. So what you get are these sort of plastic sleeves to go inside. I don't mind that for these. I wouldn't want them for the clip-ons because I want the clip-ons to clamp directly on the forks. I don't want anything in between that could slip. So they're proper ones for 35mm, but here of course doesn't really matter. The other thing is, because they're universal fit, the hole is bigger. Why they don't make it the small hole and then you could drill it out if need be, I don't know. But they generally don't. They generally make it the largest hole, and either, like with there, give you sleeves, or you have to come up with something. So what I've got to make is a couple of little sleeves to go in there. Oh, bugger. Is that good timing or what? Okay. So I'm going to make some little sleeves for these, but they actually need to have a slight spacing piece also, because you know the headlamp isn't exactly the same width as the forks are. So I'll make some that will take up the space in there and bring us out a little bit. So we'll make those shortly. The other thing is, let me zoom you out slightly to show you this, or swing you around, whichever's easier. I'll swing you around. You remember when I first looked at the handlebars, they seemed to be very long. Well, what I was forgetting was this bar end here, which of course was stopping the twist grip from sliding all the way on by a good ½ inch. So I cut a little hole. I'll be getting new handlebar grips. I cut a little hole in that, and when that slid on, that was much better. So as I say, these were black, and I got the black off and polished them. There's still some little bits to do on it, you know, awkward little places you couldn't get in. So the other thing is, I've tried a clock on here, roughly where it's going to go, and I've definitely got to shorten these clip-ons. So I'm going to mark them up and shorten them, and then we'll put them back on. So let me shorten the clip-ons and make these couple of little bits, and then we'll put the headlamp in and go from there. The switchgear, you'll remember, was also black, and I didn't want that. So I got them polished up, but I started to do these just with them like that. It was a bit difficult, so I said, come on Michael, bite the bullet here. So what I did, you can see how sort of complicated they are inside, particularly this one. You see all that in there? I took all the insides out. There's little springs in there and all sorts of things, but I took it all apart. Then I was able to bead blast these and polish them up properly. So they've come up nicely. What I'm going to do actually is, these cables are incredibly long. particularly with the clip-ons, because now of course instead of the cable having to go all the way to some tall handlebar, they just go straight to that little clip-on. So I was thinking, oh god, I'm gonna have to, let me zoom you out at the moment. That was focus, Michael, come on, get the right ring. There we go. So I was thinking, I have to cut these, shorten them and everything, and my soldering's atrocious. So I'd have lots of wires to cut and shorten. And then I thought, no I won't. I can buy these, there's one of the bigger ones. You can buy them 2 halves with all the little bits, all the little connector things to go inside. So when these switches are on, I can actually just cut these to the length I want, and then I'll put a new connector thing on. So we'll get round to that shortly. So I've made the little pieces to go in there, so we can put our headlight in. One. Two. Put them up on their little sleeves. Tighten this up when we know exactly where we want it. We've also shortened the handlebars and put the black plugs back in. So now we can put the levers back on as well. Where's the other thing gone? There it is. They all fit together nicely. They have 5mm Phillips type screws in these. I'm going to replace them with some nice stainless steel Allen bolts, which are on order. Funnily enough, the hardest thing to find is the bolt that holds the brake caliper on. Is 10. That doesn't quite look right, does it? See, I can't talk and work at the same time. Oh, what was I saying? Oh yeah, it's 10mm, but it's the 10mm fine thread, the 1.25. And my usual supplier has everything but. So I'm just going to have to find a couple of them. I hate having to buy just 1 or 2 bolts. Apart from anything else, you really pay through the nose for them. So that's that on. Where are we? Okay. Doesn't look half bad, does it? So now I've got all them on, we can sight the clocks. So let me get a clock. Limp, limp, limp. Oh. I just pulled a little bag of very small nuts and bolts off with this, and they all, of course, the bag was upside down, so there's little nuts and bolts all over the floor. So I gave this a bead blast. We'll move on to how I'm going to do this. I've had a thought about an easier way to put these new pieces in. So, well, let me see if you're seeing this. Famous thing to do. Battery's getting low as well. So, but I have a spare one in my pocket. So as I say, they would normally bolt on the top like that, But now with the handlebars cut down, I can put them nicely down in there. So apart from anything else, they fill that gap in that I was a little worried about. And also, that means the mounting plate is going to be more or less flat. I was wondering if I was going to have to put a jog in it or anything like that, but no. So, yeah, I think there's just enough space. Where's the other one? This one, of course, isn't in its cup, but that one goes in there like that. Ooh, ooh. Gonna have to move that back a little bit. That's alright, we've got some space to play with. Might have to lift them up slightly just to clear everything. Anyway, I'll fiddle around with that. But the next thing we're going to do is to do these cups. Right, instruments, clocks. As I mentioned, I was really pleased to find out that the XS650 and the XS750 had the same rev counter gearing, so I could use clocks from the 650, and I knew I had clocks. So I go in the box, and what do I find? Clocks and covers and everything. But what I didn't find was a pair that matched up. So I started looking, and I had 2 rev counters, I had 3 rev counters and 2 speedometers. Okay, but I discovered, as some people mentioned in comments, that for the most part the way they mounted these was that the clocks had 2 bolts on which went in and came through there. They bolted them into the cowl, and then there would be 2 bolts here, and the mounting plate actually just curved round. It wasn't much of a mounting plate, and that bolted on like so. But of course, the only matching pair of clocks I had were this type. Here's the Speedo, and where is it? There's a rev counter. 2 very nice clocks. But you'll notice these slope a little bit. Now the faces are the same size, the depth is the same size, because I think they've got the same internals. But although nearly all the models I looked at in the parts book mounted this way on the bottom, these shaped ones go into these smaller cups. In fact, I think that is the yeah, that's the Speedo one, and that's the one that had the gap that I showed you. So I bought the rubber things, but they don't fit in there, they fit in here. Because there's one, maybe 2 models that instead of mounting at the bottom, they actually have a bracket that mounts there, as I think one of you mentioned. So I thought, okay, let's just swap them over. But let me use the rev counter one. Not only is the clock body narrower at this end, but the bolt pattern is narrower, so it won't go on. It's the right depth, everything's right, but it won't go on. So I thought to myself, okay, we'll just have to go and buy some new clocks. So after a little lay down, because that made me go all wobbly, I decided, no, let's just forget all this stuff. Let's think. That clock's actually bent. So also, some of them had chrome bezels, some of them had black bezels. So I've got a Speedo and I've got a rev counter. So let's move all this other stuff. And I've got a pair of the deep ones, and actually these rubber things are made to go in the deep one, he says. Oh, come on, get in there. So I thought these things are probably going to be scrap if I don't do something with them. So let's see. Get in there. Get in there more. As we all know now. Alright. There it is. So they go in there like that. And as it says, it's just a damper. It's just a little rubber thing for the clock to fit in. So, what I did was, oh, that's the other thing. Of these two I've got, they're both rev counter ones, because they don't have the hole for the trip meter, but also they have the hole to let the cables out, both on the same side, which of course I don't want. I want one on one side and one on the other side, so the cables go into the middle. So anyway, I've opened them out to take the bolt pattern, moved it in towards the middle, and I also had to cut a little bit out of the middle. But now, that will go on there and match up nicely. So what I'm going to do is the plate is going to have the holes for the clocks to drop through. So the clock will drop through the mounting plate right up to here, then that will go on. Then when we bolt this up, it'll scrunch the whole thing together on the plate, and that'll be fine. So as I say, I've cut these out, so now obviously what I'm going to have to do is one side I'll have to seal this square hole up, then here I'll have to make new mounting. So I decided the easiest way to do that was to get a washer the right size for the base, and then just make up a little piece of sheet, weld them up outside, put them in, and then weld them in. So that's what we're going to do now. Now I gave this quite a bit of thought. As I first mentioned, I was going to make this out of some light gauge steel, and then I thought about a washer in the bottom and a piece of tubing, but that didn't work out too well. So I went back to my original idea and I made a little paper template like this. That goes in the bottom, they bend round. So then I'll weld up the bottoms and it'll come out like this. And then that will go in there, get welded in, mark the holes, drill them, and that should be it. So let me go and weld one of these in, and then I'll show you it. I'll drill a hole in it and we'll pop it on the clock and see that it works, and then I'll just set to and build 3 more. There's the first one in. Put the little rubber thing on. So that goes on like that. There you go. So as I say, I'll set 2, I'll do 3 more. I'm going to fill that in, cut a square hole there, and then we can mount the clocks. Or no, we can't mount the clocks. I'll make the plate to mount the clocks. Okay, so there it is, about done. I still have to cut the little square out here, but I want to use one of those little cutting wheels on a Dremel, and of course when I went to the drawer there wasn't any. So anyway, there's that bit filled in. I ended up bronzing it, and also I decided I wanted to strengthen these up a little bit, so I've bronzed in a couple of washers. But there, as you can see, it all fits up, so that will have its 1/8 inch piece of plate in there for the bracket, or the mounting plate I should say. Everything lines up nicely, room for the wires inside. There's a couple of warning lights in here, and I think there's 2 lights for, yeah, there's 2 lights to actually illuminate the clock, and the 2 warning lights. And as you can see, there's lots of space inside. So there you go. actually worked. So as I say, I have to do with the other one of these, and then we'll get round to actually making the mounting plate, which isn't going to be too difficult, and that'll be the front end done. Now we come to making the mounting plate for the two clocks, and see here the stuff you need: calipers, rulers, pencils, scissors, all sorts of stuff. So first thing we start with though are some measurements. I just jotted them down on a piece of cardboard here to keep them handy. Measured the clocks, measured the sort of size of the clock here for where it goes in the hole, measured the width of the black part so that I had enough around, measured how wide they were, you know, sort of put them how close I wanted them, laid them on a rule, so that sort of thing. And then we transfer all those measurements to our piece of cardboard. And here's the first one, and you'll see why I use cardboard here. You'll notice there, and where are we, here? I laid it out and then I decided I wanted it to be about a ½ inch wider. So I had to move one line out, and that moved the centre line, because everything is worked off a centre line to keep things symmetrical. So I then discarded that one and made another one. Again, centre line. From that I can measure across to where the bolt holes are for the mountings. I can measure across to the centres of the clock, and as long as I'm measuring from the centre, sorry, everything is going to be symmetrical, which is what we want. And I marked it up to be what I think is a reasonable shape. Now, the next thing I did, I actually probably shouldn't have cut these out before you saw me do this, but is I transferred this to a piece of aluminium. Let's say we're using 1/8 inch thick to make sure it doesn't just flop around. And what you can see I've done is I've marked, let's say I did this before I actually cut those out, I've marked all the centre points on the bolt holes. Just used a punch and transferred them to here. So now I know where I'm going to drill my mounting holes. Actually, there's 2 more to go on for the ignition switch. I've marked where the ignition switch is going to be, but it actually has, of course, 2 little mounting bolts. So I'll do those before we move over. Then I can mount this on a piece of wood, which is the easiest way to do it. I'll put that in the mill and everything's ready. I can just drill all the holes, and using that trepanning tool I can find this as my centre and cut those 2 and probably this one out here, and then it'll all be done in one. I could just move it around on the mill table. Now I'm probably going to bend this up a little bit. You know, that doesn't lay flat in relation to the ground, shall we say, because of course it's going to mount to the top yoke, and the yoke is at an angle because of the way the forks go. But I think I might want to just pick it up a little. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to, because I don't have a lot of space to make a bend in, but if I can just lift it very slightly like that, I think it'll look better. So anyway, as I say, let me move the piece of aluminium over to the mill. Right, so here it is set up, clamped down on a piece of wood so we can drill through and cut through without any danger, and it makes it nice and firm rather than trying to sort of just put it on blocks or something. So the first thing I'm going to do is drill a hole. So I've got 4 5/16 holes, which are for actually bolting it down on the handlebar clamps, and then 2 5mm holes, which are for where the switch goes. Then after that we'll move over, we'll centre onto these, and let's say use the boring head with that trepanning tool in to cut those circles. So let's get, I won't bore you with all of them, we'll just set up and drill one, get it down close so I can see. Could do with 3 arms. Okay. And you see how much easier it is when you just got a piece of wood underneath. It supports everything nicely and you can go through without any danger to the drill or to your table. So let me drill all the other holes and then I'll come back when we're going to bore the big holes. I've got my holes drilled, so now I'm going to set up for boring where the actual instruments are going to go. So what I've done is I've put the sort of follow center in that you use when you're tapping, and I'm going to use that because it goes to a nice point and it's stiff, to spot on the hole to center it. Then we'll put the boring head in. I'll mark it up on the DRO so that I know I don't wander off. So we'll go to the center hole we punched. Now, of course, really, if I'd wanted to be really exact, what I should have done is set this plate up so that it was exactly square, and then that way, for instance, when I did these holes, I could have just moved from one to the other, and at least one axis would have been right. But I didn't. So we're just going to do it this way and find each one individually. Like that, and tell you what, we'll set that to 0 and we'll lock down the table. So there's the whatever axis, Y axis, and there is the X axis. So we're all locked up. You'll notice on these that whenever you do that, it moves. So it's moved 0.0, well, 4 zeros, 1/10 of a thou, 2/10 of a thou. So I'm not worried about that in this particular instance. So let me bring this back down here, and I'll put the boring head in and bring you back. Now I'll put a bit of die chem on, so hopefully you can see this. I've got the boring head set at 0 on the thing in there, and what I'm going to do is make a mark and then measure from the center to the mark to find out how far off the radius I am, and then I can dial it out closer. Now, a thing to remember with boring heads is it's not like on the lathe. If you dial in a thou on the cross side of the lathe, it takes 2 thou off the diameter because it takes a thou off all the way around. These are calibrated so that if you dial in a thou, you take a thou off the diameter, not off the radius. So when I measure this, I've got to halve whatever the measurement is. So the radius is 1.8125. Let's see if I can do this without knocking the camera over. Or right, so there's that. There's where we set at now at 0, and we'll put this in there and take this out to the edge of that. Now this is just, won't exactly say a rough measurement, but it's going to give me a guide. Okay, so that is 1.727. So let me do the maths and then I'll come back. That makes us 90, where is that? I've forgotten already. 92 thou off the radius. We have another 92 thou to go off. So on this, I would only want to dial 46. So let me, where am I? Where's my little doodad gone? So I'm going to dial another 40 in, and then we'll take a more accurate measurement of the diameter. D30. And we'll tighten this up. Not that you can see any of this, of course. There we are. On the hoof filming. So just tighten them up. Check, I've got my 40 there. So let's just make a mark and see how that measures. Let me take it down. God, this is difficult with the camera there. And make sure for one thing that I'm not going to smack into that. No, loads of room. Good. So put that back in gear. Let's just take it down to make a mark. Because for one thing, the trepanning tool, the edge isn't brilliant because I ground it. So the measurement I made might not be to exactly where it should be. So let's try again. I'm getting 173 now. So it's only, see, it's 3 thou wider than I thought. So I'm going to cut this out and then I'll bore it. Now you may have noticed that wobbled a little bit, so I'm going to see if I can fit a clamp on the corner of it. So let me cut this out and then we'll come back. Alright, so you didn't see what I was talking about. I just measured again from there to the edge of that to give me a closer measurement. So now let me put a clamp on here and cut this out. Now I can actually measure the diameter. If you're wondering what this bit of green tape is there for, it's so that the vibration didn't make that run out and catch in the head. Because when you're concentrating on one thing, you don't always notice the things that are happening at the side. So let's have a look, see what we've got here. .513. 3.513. And we want it to be 3 5/8, which is 3.625. 3.625. If you can hear wheels whirring in the background, it's me doing this maths. 3 from 5 is 2, 1 from 2 is 1, 5 from 6 is 1, 3 from 3 is 0. 112 thou. Which is, well, that's 50 odd off the diameter. I must have really mismeasured the other time, mustn't I? Anyway, whatever. I'll double check that and then set the this to whatever I need to do it, and we'll come back and see if we're either right or if I've made a pig's ear of it. Truth in video. Let me put you on. No, I'll leave it on manual, and I'll show you where I went wrong. Bear with me. Anybody spot the deliberate mistake? Yeah, I took 3 places of decimals from 4 places of decimals, and I deducted the 7 from the 5. Actually, I went completely wrong, didn't I? Because 7 from 5 should be 8 anyway. Oh dear me. Anyway, let's get back and do it right. Now, as this mill setup wasn't particularly finicky, I've taken the plate out. I actually want to turn it round anyway because it's easier to do it this side. So I thought, while I got it out, here's the rev counter. Not too bad, eh? So, barring that little hitch in the middle, yeah, that's nice. See, it's right onto the wider part. Good tight fit. Once that's squeezed up, everything will be. In fact, tell you what, take the rubber off so that we go even closer to the bezel. Really nice tight fit. Great. Okay, let me set 2 and do the other one, and then we'll see about shaping this up. So here's the plate with all the holes cut and drilled. 1 clock to the clock. Ignition switch. So now all I've got to do is mark it out and cut it to its shape. But I've had one annoyance, so let me show you. See how observant you are. Let me zoom you in a little bit. These mounting ears are not across the centre line of the switch, which of course is where I drilled the holes. So consequently, the holes don't line up. They're out by about a half a hole. So it's no big problem. I'll just weld these back up and measure it again and mark them and drill them. But it was annoying. So anyway, let me cut it to shape. Alright, there we are. Finished, but I need some viewer input. Right, first of all, actually let me zoom you out so you get an idea of what it all looks like. Okay, I'm definitely going to just flip them up a little bit, not so much because of the way the clocks are, but we're getting rather close to things here, and I think that'll just give me a little bit more space. So it's not going to be much, but yeah. But the other thing is, I'm not so sure whether it looks a bit big and clunky. So what do you think? Should I think being 1/8, I think it's going to be strong enough. Should I do something like that on each side? Thin it down. Little bit a la Royal Enfield Continental GT, for those of you who remember that beautiful little thing. That is basically the shape that the top yoke was, where the 2 clocks were in. So I moved my holes, as I say, filled them in with weld, re-drilled them. So now the switch is in. Here's another thing. I've got a high beam warning light and I've got a neutral warning light. Do you think I should put a couple of little lights in? I don't know, one for oil, one for charge. I don't know. Anyway, there it is. Front end done. Handlebars, levers, clocks, switches, headlamp. I think it looks rather nice. So let me move you round and I'll switch you off rather than get you all seasick again. There you are. What do you think of that? Does it look the part? I think so. And I think maybe tip the clocks. You see, basically This plate is as small as I can make it to fit everything in. These clocks are very big, as it happens. I almost being the operative word, Mike's Excess, the place I mentioned for Yamaha 650s, do a pair of clocks which are sort of meant to look like a Smith's clock. Like that. And you can see the difference in size of these things. These are 100 and something millimeters, or 4 and a bit inches. This is only 100 millimeters, and the ones that Mike XS does are 80. I could make the whole thing, you know, much more compact, but it would also cost me $200. And I'd have to fiddle around with wires, because these have the right connectors on the end for the illumination. The other clocks, of course, just have bare wires. You'd have to start making them. So anyway, let me know what you think, particularly about slimming this in. Alright, so I'm going to limp off into the sunset, and you just go and enjoy yourselves.